Hex, every now and then a game comes along that reminds us how awesome it is to have games.
Games are pretty good.
Yeah, and today that's proved once again with Transformers Fall of Cybertron.
Angel, angel, what have I done? A face that quakes, the wind, the fire. I've conquered country, crown and throne. Why can't I cross this river?
Oh, Hex, I never thought Transformers would get the game they truly deserve. And War for Cybertron was pretty close, but developer High Moon Studios have outdone themselves here. Fall of Cybertron is a well-crafted story of a civilization's struggle to survive. It's about sacrifice for the greater good. It's full of lovable heroes and villains.
This is what you chose, Prime, when you defied me!
And doing what Transformers do best, transforming and fighting each other constantly.
Yes, this is an epic story about the final days of Cybertron. The planet is dying with its energon resources depleted. Optimus and the gang are gathering all the energon they can to launch the Ark, a massive ship which will send them off through a space portal to start anew. But of course, the Decepticons have other plans.
Megatron.
The game begins in the exciting final moments of the story, then takes you back a few days to play out the events leading up to that epic conclusion. And this technique works really well because if after finishing the game you go back and replay the start, you'll begin to see how it all really ties together.
Yeah, they nailed that pacing in the campaign too, didn't they? After the prologue, you do the Autobot tour as Optimus Prime, who is voiced wonderfully by Peter Cullen as usual.
Ratchet, how can I help?
This meet and greet gets you straight into the nostalgic mood and sparks all those forgotten childhood memories, and they all came flooding back, Hex, as I started talking to all the different Autobots around the place.
Warpath, give me a status update. Receptor and a bunch of tech heads are trapped inside the nerve center at the south gate.
Barjo, I like how when the Transformers are talking to each other, they always use the name of who they're talking to, just to remind you.
Hex, I like that a lot too. The voice acting is pitch perfect.
There's solid writing behind it too, from the one-liners from your teammates in the field
Optimus, are you all right?
to the classic Optimus speech moments.
We do not know how many of our brothers escaped Megatron's blockade.
He's such a good hero.
Yeah, it's something about that gruff old man general voice that just inspires.
Yeah.
He deserted us.
He left his post for a reason. I want to know why.
I like the way he elongates the R's.
Perceptor.
Perceptor!
I'll handle it, Perceptor.
There's a good sense of end of days as the Transformers tear each other and the world apart. I was really worried that another game set on Cybertron would start to get a bit tedious, but that wasn't the case at all. There's much more variation in the set pieces this time around. There's always fights in the distance, Transformers running about the place. It's a foreign feeling world full of wonderful metallic backdrops and mechanical noises and movements.
And it's quite beautiful at times too. Just as you start to get to grips with the controls and transforming, you meet Metroplex. He destroys everything in his path, airstrikes your targets, makes bridges for Optimus, and then gives you some awesome fist pump moments.
You'll then proceed to swap amongst familiar Autobots and Decepticons as you play out the campaign. The final hour of this game starts to do this right in the middle of fights too, which really creates some conflict switching from one side to the other, but you know, you're forced to just deal with it.
Yeah, and then it brings it all to a point right at the end. Oh, that last hour is so spectacular here.
I think it was the variety in the action that really surprised me, Barjo. This time, each section has a unique look and strategy, whether it be stealthing around as Cliffjumper, voiced by Nolan North,
My senses are jammed.
or grappling around a zone as Jazz, which opens up the levels vertically more and introduces sniping.
Up you go!
And they've made most of these sections feel quite fleshed out and polished as well.
I especially enjoyed the airborne sections, not only because they look visually spectacular, but also because you have to transform for more tactical reasons. zipping about as a helicopter that's also a jet, laying waste to those below you, and then transforming down and smashing enemies in a ground assault. Wah!
Me, pal. You were the easy target.
And playing as Megatron is especially thrilling because you'll flip to tank mode in the middle of a fight and blast away enemies, then transform back. It's so thrilling, Hex.
Vehicle controls are a little bit simplistic, kind of like a hovercraft, but it's not necessarily a bad thing, and it actually lends itself a lot better to the combat in the game. But it does make the sections where you're driving and chase sequences feel a little bit clumsy. But it's always fun transforming, and they do a really good job of hinting at when it's a good time to do so. Each transformer has their own special ability too. There's airstrikes, cloaking, and the aforementioned grapple. I also found them way more fun and more useful this time around because the levels were designed to make use of them specifically.
You have 2 weapons at any time, and they beautifully integrate into your arm. There's a good selection. I'm a big fan of the riot cannon, which goes especially well with Megatron style. And the heavy weapons are quite diverse too, from remote detonating globules to lock-on rockets that spin around an enemy even if they're running for cover.
There's also an innovative rating system where you can rate weapons and upgrades for the greater community. I mean, what a great idea. It gives you a sense of what's most popular.
Yeah, I want to see that in other games. They've worked hard at tightening up that combat, haven't they? Everything just feels better. Enemies take hits better and they don't blend into the background like they did in the last game. You can tell who's on your side and who isn't. And there's a fine balance of reload and maneuverability. I also like that your secondary weapon only has a very limited supply, so you're encouraged to transform and use your vehicle weapons.
Megatron! He flies now?
I remember you saying that you didn't like having to scrounge around for ammo so much in the last game, Budge, and you do still have to do that here.
Yeah, but I think it's more balanced this time, and I think part of that is because enemies seem to go down a bit quicker, and that's because they've removed the co-op. Also, you're not constantly having to revive your teammates, and that keeps the action flowing. I think this removal of co-op has allowed them to focus on telling a more individual story for each Autobot and Decepticon a bit better, and also it's allowed them to open up the levels design a bit more because they can focus on the special abilities of those Transformers.
I think some people are really going to miss the co-op, but it has actually made for a better game. Combat is by no means easy though. You'll die plenty on normal difficulty.
I believe the scientific term for that is pulverized.
It takes a bit to get used to as it's a little bit like mech fighting, but the movement is so responsive and you can robot combat roll or dash out of trouble with ease.
I like the enemy AI too. It's reactive and they run about and retreat and take cover and take pot shots. It is a bit strange that you can hide from them so easily though.
Where'd he go?
Whenever you hear them yell out, "Where'd he go?" It's like, I'm a big robot, I'm just behind this rock over here. But that works for the combat, and there's plenty of variety with the heavier units as well.
And then there's Grimlock. It's especially wonderful to have the Dinobots around, and this story deals with their creation. It tells the story of how they were taken, tortured, and tested on, and how they're all based on designs scanned from Earth.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of that lore in here. Now, I'm not 100% up to scratch with all of the Transformers lore in all of its entirety, but I just accept that they can turn into vehicles and they're robots and they can turn into dinosaurs, and that's all I need. That's all anyone should need. But they repeatedly make a point of mentioning Earth and addressing the design origins, which is great. Hex, I love the whole Grimlock section, but I have to admit, playing as Grimlock wasn't as fun as I thought it would be.
Yeah, he's pretty slow, and his dino fighting is a bit awkward. You can't deny that you feel pretty tough as you whack enemies into the distance with your tail and eat them for health. It was a fun section.
Yeah, and it's worth it for that transformation animation alone. And how good do all the models look? You know, Grimlock's face as he's breathing out fire, all the transformations. And they just nail the designs of all of these characters and the world. The interpretation is perfect.
And it was nice to see that the Insecticons got a play too. They're a fun kind of swarming enemy. And Bruticus was awesome, especially that first time he comes together. And I really liked his helicopter shield.
The campaign is about 7 to 8 hours, and it felt short to me, Hex, but I think that's just because I was having such a good time. And there are lots of those little moments in the cutscenes where you can do just a simple quick time event, but it's an important moment or an emotional scene, so it lets you be involved in that. I love those.
Well, I know you're looking at this through Transformer-coloured eyes.
The optics.
Yes, and I thought I'd have to be the voice of reason in this review, but this really is an awesome game, and they've put some real love into the multiplayer as well. There's a wave mode called Escalation where you'll slowly unlock different areas of maps and fight for survival against a variety of enemies, and that'll change your strategy with every few waves.
There's also a bunch of versus modes, and at the time of review we could only test our deathmatch and we weren't able to unlock very much at all. But it's also class-based with lots of abilities such as cloaking and healing, and there's plenty to customize. They have opened up the maps a little bit in multiplayer, I think, and the bigger ones are more fun, but I still would have liked a truly massive map to tear up. We played this on 360 and it runs quite smooth with some very nice transitions to cover loading and only a few frame flutters here and there.
A bit softer on the frame rate issues this week, Barjo.
Transformers is a complicated business. What I'm most excited about now is that the next Transformers game will likely be set on Earth and it will likely be next gen and hopefully it'll be in the 80s. The only thing that could have made this game better is if it played You've Got the Touch, you know, that song that played in that classic moment in that Optimus Prime fight scene in the 1986 Transformers movie. And then when the credits rolled...
You got the touch. You got the power. You got the touch.
In fact, many of the moments from that film are echoed within this game.
Well, I think it's really clear that the developers just love Transformers. They really want to reignite that nostalgia in people.
Yeah, I admit, Hex, towards the end I got a little emotional at one particular point.
Did you cry in a Transformers game?
Maybe a little bit. Just because they're robots from space doesn't mean I can't be invested in the characters and their stories and get emotional about it.
Well, look, I think even if you're not a Transformers fan, you will love this game. But if you are, it's gonna blow your mind. So I'm giving it 8.5.
For me, the most important thing is it hit the tone right, from the arguments between Megatron and Starscream.
Funny, isn't it, Megatron? How easily I defeated the one adversary you couldn't.
Silence!
To those little wacky humor moments.
Hey, I'd be angry too if Megatron made a fool of me. Not that you're a fool, of course. I'm the fool.
And to have it all displayed so cinematically in modern gaming is just wonderful. So I'm giving this 9 out of 10 rubber chickens.
I gave you an order, so... Ah! Oh no! I need... Good game. Good game.
Hex, when I heard there was a new Transformers game, my heart skipped a beat, but then it proceeded to break in half when I saw the box art, because these are Michael Bay's Transformers in Rise of the Darkspark.
There is no escape, Decepticon. Surrender the Darkspark or be destroyed.
I propose a tertiary alternative.
From the very first moments of this Transformers adventure, you know you're in trouble. And I'm not exactly sure, Barjo, but is this Decepticon trying to do a cheesy Arnie impression?
The Darkspark empowers its master to bend the very fabric of the universe and its inhabitants to his will.
I listened to that a few times wondering if the devs were serious.
Yeah, it almost seems like developers Edge of Reality knew what game they were making and they've let those frustrations come through in the dialogue.
This is our finest hour. Cybertron is nearly ours.
The Transformers themselves know they're in for a long and dull journey and they just want it over with.
What is this insanity? What is the meaning of this attack?
Yes, by all means. Let us continue this pointless fool's errand.
I haven't seen the recent film because I'm mostly still upset about the last 3, but let's talk about the story. The Darkspark is your typical MacGuffin. It can bring ultimate destruction if it falls into the wrong robotic hands by bending the universe to the owner's will. And unfortunately, it's through this mechanic that the writers are trying to bring together the worlds of the movies and the previous games.
In this third-person shooter, you take on the role of, well, almost everyone, as you battle through both sides of the war, trying to track down and take possession of this ancient artifact.
Isn't the imaginary vault for your imaginary Darkspark this way?
I imagine so.
The game makes you constantly swap characters, and this makes an already contrived story more complicated for absolutely no reason.
Yeah, I think they were just trying to keep fans happy by letting you play as your favorite bot.
Yeah, possibly, and maybe that would have worked if they'd really nailed the characters, but it's almost like they base their research off just a couple of episodes and maybe someone read the synopsis of all 3 films on Wikipedia.
Autobots, open fire!
Let's see what we got.
Now, I know you see Optimus Prime as kind of a childhood hero. Do you think they got him right at least?
Well, when you have Peter Cullen, the voice of Optimus, to lend his vocal talents, it's hard not to squeal a little inside. But that squeal was muffled by a lot of general sighing.
I love how Optimus says that this, again, is their darkest hour.
That's how he starts all his monologues. Yeah.
This is our darkest hour.
It's hard not to feel underwhelmed by this game almost instantly. The very first level is essentially a series of wave modes in some pretty bland environments that were even a bit tricky to drive through. It's not a good looking game, and Hex, I think some of those textures belong on last gen.
I tried creating a slow pan montage of some of the more spectacular scenes, and this is what I ended up with.
Just beautiful, Hex.
On the plus side, the shooting mechanics do work really well, and there's a good variety of weapons. Things like acid slime cannons, to my personal favourite, the Tech Vault, which makes short work of your robotic foes. But upgrading the guns just didn't seem to have any real effect, and I spent more of my time in battles dash attacking, as it felt better and got me through the fights faster.
I think the biggest letdown for me was the transforming, which is a problem when your game is called Transformers. For a start, there were times where the game wouldn't even let me transform for some reason or another, which I took particular offense to.
Tunnels. We will meet you on the other side.
But also, I rarely felt the need to transform into vehicle mode, and the whole point of a Transformers game is that ability to transform.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I'd be switching between forms to travel long distances or maybe solve some platforming puzzles, but it's like they forgot they were making a Transformers game.
I remember talking to High Moon Studios, who were the developer behind two of the recent and decent Transformers games, and they said that that was one of their biggest challenges, building an entire game where your main character can be a robot or a vehicle at any time. The real difference, though, between their excellent Cybertron series of Transformers games is that they have a real love for the characters and the lore, and that shines through constantly. I even cried a little in the last one, Hex.
Till all are one.
You brave fool. Perhaps this developer also has a love for Transformers, but being tied to a movie franchise and the often short development time that comes with that, maybe that smothered it a little.
I find it interesting that just a few years ago, nearly every big Hollywood movie had a short and nasty game tie-in, but we don't really see that much these days, so I was surprised this game even got made, to be honest.
Yeah, I thought those days were behind us as well. Games are not easy to make, even a movie game, and with more choice out there now for gamers, I wonder how this kind of game can still exist and still get funding. Overall, this is a functional cardboard box of a game. I'm giving it 4 out of 10 rubber chickens. It hurt my childhood a little.
Yeah, it feels rushed, and it probably was. Rise of the Darkspark will soon be appearing in a budget bin near you. I'm giving it 4 out of 10 as well.
They're getting away.
Your incompetence never ceases to amaze me, Starscream.
Save your barbs for later. We can't let them escape.
No escape.
Are you really not going to see the movie? It's got your favourite one in it, Grimlock, the dinosaur.
I'm upset just thinking about it.
Here's Goose with the news.